Now I'm ready. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today it's 2:01, so it's time to get our webinar started. I'm Corey Hallett. I'm a program director in the NCI SBIR Development Center, and I'm here today with my director, Michael Weingarten, and my colleague, Deepa Narayanan, and we're going to talk to you about some new funding opportunities from our program. I want to share a couple housekeeping things before we get started. So this webinar is being recorded. We will share the slides with anyone who's registered. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. There's two things. There's Q&A and there's chat. But if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. We will send out a post-event survey. It's very important to us that you fill this out so that we know how to improve and so that we know if these are helpful to you. And our email is there at the bottom. It's ncisbir@mail.nih.gov. Please feel free to contact us with any questions or comments after the webinar. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael Weingarten, the director of the NCI SBIR Development Center, to give you a little bit of background about SBIR and STTR.
Thanks very much, Corey. I really appreciate it. I also want to thank everyone for joining us today. It's a great opportunity for us to share information about our program, and specifically both Corey and Deepa are going to focus on two brand new funding opportunities that we've been working on for quite a while that we're interested in hopefully engaging the community in. So they're going to really get into the details on that. I'm just going to take a minute to just give you a broad overview of what SBIR is all about. Next slide, please. So SBIR is actually a congressionally mandated program that was set up back in 1982, where a percentage of the NCI budget, we are required to set aside a certain percentage every year to support small businesses, to really engage in technology development that supports the NCI mission. SBIR, there are actually two sister programs. There's SBIR, which is specifically focused on funding small businesses to engage in research and development activities that support the NCI mission. And the budget for that this year is right around $157 million. It's 3.2% of the NCI extramural budget. And then the sister program, known as STTR, which is the Small Business Technology Transfer Program, actually requires a collaboration between a small business and a university. And the goal of STTR is actually to translate and transition that technology that was originally developed in a university setting to a small business. So the amount of funding for STTR is less. This year it's about $22 million. Based on the set-aside percentage, but can actually be a great vehicle to utilize for, again, supporting the translation of technologies from universities to small business. Next slide, please. Why should you compete for SBIR funding? Well, the way SBIR is set up is actually a very good deal for small businesses. The intellectual property rights are retained by the small business. The government doesn't take any sort of IP position, whatever intellectual property that you create as a small business under this award. The other important aspect of SBIR is it's not a loan, so there's no repayment that's required by you if you receive funding for us. We either fund projects as grants or as contracts. And the two funding opportunities that Deepa and Corey are both going to talk about today, one is actually a contract opportunity, one is a grant opportunity. The other thing is we don't take any sort of equity position in your company, so the funding is non-dilutive. So another good deal for the small business. And then finally, because all applications are reviewed by the NIH peer review process, that actually creates a great opportunity when you're trying to raise additional capital and additional funding from venture capital, as an example, because they very much respect the NIH peer review process. So it can really help to serve you in the long run to raise additional private funding. Next slide, please. In terms of what we fund under SBIR, it's a very broad-based portfolio. We really fund technologies across the cancer space. The major requirement is that the technology that you're developing, it has to have commercial potential. That's one of the major goals of the SBIR program. But if you look here, this actually gives you a sense of how the portfolio is distributed across all technology areas. Therapeutics being the largest part of our portfolio at 43%. That's followed by in vitro diagnostics at 16%. And then devices are actually a very important part of our portfolio too. Imaging devices are at 14%, followed by devices for cancer therapy, which includes radiotherapy and surgical tools. And then finally, we also fund research tools, and digital health is also covered under our portfolio. So all in all, this past year, we had 475 active projects. That's split about 86% between grants and about 14% in contracts. Next slide, please. I mentioned a minute ago that commercialization is one of the key goals of the SBIR program. We were very interested in analyzing the impact of the program. So a couple of years ago, we hired a consultant to actually look at the impact of SBIR. And we identified a cohort of 690 grants, phase 2 SBIR grants that we had funded between 1998 and 2010. And we hired the consultant actually to go out and contact all of those different grantees to find out what had happened with the funding that we had provided. And specifically, we wanted to know if those companies had been successful in commercializing their technologies. And what we found was that actually, out of those 690 projects, 247 of those projects resulted in a commercialized technology, and 368 of those total projects either resulted in the commercialization of the technology, or those companies had been able to achieve royalties from their technology or follow-on funding. So overall, the success of the program has been quite strong. Those 247 projects that were commercialized were actually able to achieve over $9 billion in sales total. And then we worked with an economist to look at not only the sales impact, but what was the overall economic impact. And they used some economic modeling to actually show that the impact of the program overall was actually over $26 billion total in total economic impact nationwide. So NCI, we invested about $787 million in those 690 projects, and in turn, those projects generated over $26 billion in total economic output, which is about a 33-to-1 impact overall. Next slide, please. One of the things that's unique about our program across the NIH as a whole is that we've actually set up a center for managing SBIR, and our center is staffed with 21 people who spend 100% of their time just on working with companies like yourself and applicants who are applying to the program who might have originated at a university. So these are just some of the services that we're able to offer because we've set up our center. We provide funding, but we know that small businesses need a lot more than just funding to be successful. So we spend a lot of our time advising applicants on how to write stronger applications. And then we engage in outreach like webinars like this. And then after we provide the funding, we do other things, such as we provide a program called I-Core, which is an entrepreneurship training program that really teaches our startup companies how to build a business model around the technology that they're developing. So I-Core is a really important component to our program. And if you get funded, once you get to a phase 1 SBIR or STTR, you then become eligible to participate in our I-Core program. Finally, we develop a network of investors around the country that we've really been building over the last 10 years. We have a network of about 100 different investors that we have relationships with. And because of that network, we can make introductions to some of the top VCs around the country. And we have an investor initiatives program that you also become eligible to participate in once you're part of our program. Next slide, please. This is our team. These are the program directors on our team, and they all specialize in different technology areas. So if you have any questions coming out of today where you want to talk about a potential project idea where you'd like to consider applying, and we hope that you do, we encourage you to send us an email to ncisbir@mail.nih.gov, and we can set up a one-on-one meeting where you can talk to us about your project idea. And on that note, I will hand it back over to Corey.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm going to talk briefly about a new funding announcement that we've just released, the Small Business Transition Grant. I don't think Michael covered this in his section, but I just want to lay out the how funding is awarded at NCI because it'll be important when I talk about the structure of the Small Business Transition Grant. So at NCI, a phase one, which is really proof of concept early type activities, is a 1-year award or up to 1-year award for $400,000. And the phase two award is more, it's continued research and development. It's where the commercial plan really starts to come around. The technology and a commercialization plan is required in the application. And this is $2 million over 2 to 3 years. We then have a follow-on award that's a phase 2B bridge award. I'm not going to talk about the phase 2B bridge award today, only to say that this is a large dollar award that really requires third-party matching funds in order to be competitive in peer review. So I want to focus again on the phase one and phase two because the Small Business Transition Grant is a fast-track award, which is a combined phase one and phase two. You have a phase one component of the application with clear and need to propose clear success criteria, and if those success criteria are met, then it transitions to phase two. So in all, the Small Business Transition Grant can propose up to $2.4 million in research. So as Michael mentioned, we fund through both contracts and grants, and as Deepa and I talk about the two new funding announcements today, one is a grant and one is a contract. So the Small Business Transition Grant is obviously utilizes the grant mechanism. And the purpose of this award is really to try to have a mentored path as junior scientists move into small businesses or become entrepreneurs. The Small Business Transition Grant is modeled after the well-established K99R00 Path to Independence Award, and this is an intermediary step between a postdoc or a junior scientist on their way to becoming a tenured faculty. And when we looked at the path to entrepreneurship or the path from academic training into a small business, there is no intermediary step, and so we developed the Small Business Transition Grant to try to help people who are headed in the small business direction. A little bit of background on why we developed this. We did a small evaluation last year and looked at application SBIR and STTR success by the type of principal investigator relative to their experience with NIH funding. And so what we noticed was that experienced NIH investigators, which are defined as investigators that have received R01 or equivalent funding, they are more successful at receiving a competitive score in peer review of SBIR and STTR applications. We had spoken around this time, we were speaking with institutions that house NCI designated cancer centers and learning more about how they encourage entrepreneurship and how they encourage technology development in small businesses. And we found that a lot of these institutions are targeting postdocs to be the individual that moves with the technology into a small business. And part of this is to preserve their tenured faculty's dedication and time to discovery research and to grants that go to the university as opposed to go to a small business. And we also found that there's really a need for more scientists with business experience. And so we started asking the question internally if there was a way that NCI SBIR program could support emerging entrepreneurs or scientists moving into a small business setting and in a sort of mentored, trained environment so that we would produce more scientists with business experience. And so we developed this concept of the small business transition grant. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a fast track, but it's a unique fast track in that it is the phase 1 portion of the fast track is an STTR, and the phase 2 portion of the fast track is an SBIR. And if you'll remember, when Michael talked about the difference between these two programs, one of the main differences is how much they utilize universities in their work. So the phase 1 STTR requires a collaboration with a university, and in fact, the university has to do up to 30% of the work. And the employee can be maintained, their employment can stay, or the principal investigator can be employed at the university. Under SBIR, this program permits collaboration with a university, and the PI must be employed at the small business. And so how we see this working for the small business transition grant is that under the phase 1 STTR, there's a training component and a technical component. The small business PI, which is a postdoc or other junior scientist, would likely be at the university, still preparing the technology to move out into the small business. There's a mentoring plan required, and 2 identified mentors need to be in the application. This is a technical mentor that'll help identify how to achieve the right milestones from a technical perspective, and also a business mentor to help the PI understand what are the right milestones for commercialization. There's, as I mentioned, the PI would be predominant. We envision, they could be at the small business because this is an STTR, so they could be in either location, but we envision the PI will be likely at the university under the phase 1 STTR, preparing the technology to move to the small business. And one thing that is important here is that I-Corps at NIH is required for transition to phase 2. In order to transition, one of the key things that needs to happen is the principal investigator here, so this is the junior postdoc or junior scientist, must move their place of employment from the university to the small business in order to meet the eligibility criteria of the SBIR program. There needs to be a series of updates reported to the program officer, so the R&D milestones, whether they've been achieved, an update to the commercialization plan, and then an updated IP agreement between the university and the small business, showing that the university continues to support the development of the technology in the small business. The award would then transition to a phase 2 SBIR. It's not a non-transferable award, so it would need to be the same PI as phase 1. The mentoring must continue. How the relationship there, because the PI may start to gain a little bit more independence, so we're less prescriptive on the frequency and the contact type, but we do want a mentoring relationship to continue under phase 2. And then most of the research at this point should be conducted at the small business site. Some small pivots are allowed to the technical plan, but we couldn't allow major scope changes. This would all have to fit within the small pivots or small scope changes that are allowed within an NIH grant normally. Just a few of the specifics in the funding announcement, you can go to our website, sbir.cancer.gov, and find a link to more information under the funding tab. The PI for this award must be no more than 8 years from their terminal degree, and we really are encouraging women and scientists for underrepresented backgrounds to apply. The mentoring is a key component of this application, and it is special review criteria. You can find more information in the RFA, but the mentors are expected to put in at least 2 hours a week with the PI to help them make the leap from academic science to sort of milestone-driven development in the small business. And then the technology development is critical. This is not only a training award. So if the technology fails to meet its go, no-go criteria or its go criteria, we're not guaranteeing a transition to phase 2. There are 2 institutes that are participating in the Small Business Transition Grant. That is us at NCI, and then also the National Human Genome Research Institute. And so the points of contact for this funding announcement are here. They can also be found in the RFA. With that, I'm going to hand over the presenter duties to Deepa Narayanan so she can talk to you about our other newly launched funding announcement.
Thank you, Corey. For some reason, okay, my video is blinking. But before I start, one of the things that I wanted to share is that the slides from this webinar will be shared with everybody. We do ask that you not post the slides on the web somewhere because these contents keep changing, and so we don't want a trail of information that is outdated on the web, but all the slides will be shared. With that being said, so the concept award, as Michael mentioned, is a contract mechanism. So this is different from the grant mechanism that Corey covered recently for the small business transition grant. The contracts are sort of our way of funding NCI scientific and priority areas and those that have interest to the commercial sector. So that's usually why we do contracts. I want to take a little time to explain the difference between SBIR grants and SBIR contracts. Both these vehicles are funding mechanisms for us to fund R&D. So in both cases, we are funding R&D. And in both cases, the IP and it's non-dilutive funding. The IP rests with the company, and the government is not taking any share of the work that's being done. However, the key differences between grants and contracts are in grants, usually the scope of work is defined by the investigator. So, for example, for the transition grant, you can do any sort of technology as long as it fits the mission of NCI, since we are funding this. But for contracts, there is a pretty narrow scope that we define, that we want people to work in a specific area. Review is usually done at the Center for Scientific Review for grants and within NCI for contracts. However, for the transition grant, the review is being done at NCI too because it's such a special funding opportunity. Another key difference is that, and this is very important, is for grants, you can speak with the program officer at any time, and we are happy to talk to you about the specifics of your grant application. For contracts, all questions have to be funneled to a contracting officer or a contracting specialist. They will ask the questions within program. We respond to the contracting officer, and they share the response with you. And this is because we want to make sure that everybody gets the same information. Grants typically have multiple receipt dates. Contracts typically have just one receipt date a year. Another important criteria is that contracts usually have a negotiation process. That is, once you're funded, you go a little back and forth with us to finalize your deliverables and what your statement of work should be. That process doesn't really exist for grants. And the progress reports also for contracts are a lot more frequent than they are for grants. So these are sort of the difference between contracts and grants. So I actually like showing this slide essentially because SBIR it emphasizes the difference between academic grants versus SBIR grants. So in my opinion, while academic grants are science-based, SBIR grants are usually product focused. So even if the science is exemplary, if it doesn't result in a product, it's not the best fit for an SBIR program. So, and what is happening is that because SBIR, STTR grants are focused on product development, and innovation is essentially defined not as what is potentially or theoretically possible as it is in an academic grant, but more in terms of differentiation from current products on the market or standard of care. Sometimes the really, really risky projects and the disruptive innovations sometimes don't often come into the program, and if they come, they sometimes don't fare well in peer review. So this particular concept award that I'm going to talk about is an effort to capture those kind of technologies. A little history about how this came about. So in late 2018 and early 2019, Dr. Sharpless, the director of NCI, put together an external working group consisting of folks from academia, industry, the investment community, small businesses, pharma, and this group evaluated our SBIR program and gave some suggestions for improvement. So while they were largely happy with the way that we've been handling the program, they had 8 suggestions for improvement. And out of all of those suggestions, this particular suggestion of implementing an SBIR concept award was the one that got the most traction and excitement from most of the group. And I believe that the reason is that the working group felt the need for encouraging more innovation. They thought that we as NCI should focus, and particularly as NCI SBIR, should focus on innovation and foster really early stage, high risk, high reward projects that private industry may not fund at this particular point. So with that in mind, they encourage us to develop a particular funding solicitation around very early stage technologies. So this particular solicitation, the Concept Award, is to support small businesses developing highly innovative and transformative technologies that have the potential to create new scientific paradigms or improve clinical approaches in the area of pediatric or rare cancers. So those are the 2 areas that we're focusing on for the Concept Award. Again, as I mentioned, the point of contact for this particular solicitation is Sherry Wells. So all questions must be addressed to her. Her contact information is provided here. So this is a phase 1 solicitation only. Clinical trials are not allowed. There's one receipt date. And there is an option of submitting a white paper, which you all are very highly encouraged to do if you're submitting a proposal. This white paper is essentially going to be a 2 to 3 page summary of the project. We will review it internally. We'll get a couple of subject matter experts to review it and give you feedback on whether it is responsive and the things that might be of concern. So this is $300,000 total cost. It's a 1-year award. You have to be a small business to apply. So all of the eligibility criteria for SBIR still stand for this particular funding opportunity. And we do encourage all offerers to apply, and especially those that have never submitted an SBIR before, or those that are sort of new to the program. We really want to get more innovative ideas from places that we're not getting them from. So some of the key differences for this concept award. So why is this different from the other contracts that we do? So again, as I mentioned, the idea is to support very high risk, high reward technologies in pediatric and rare cancer. And the goal is to really de-risk ideas at an early stage and de-risk very innovative ideas. We realize that a lot of these technologies will fail. And we are ready for that high rate of failure for some of these technologies because de-risking, very innovative ideas often come with that. You are allowed to submit a white paper to get program input. We were never able to do that earlier for contract solicitation, so that is a new feature. It's a very short application, just 15 pages versus 50 that is usually there, or 50 to 75 that are usually there for grant applications or other contract proposals. We really do not expect or require preliminary data. It won't be taken as a big part of the review consideration. Again, this is because we want to fund ideas that are already not de-risked enough. So if you have a ton of preliminary data, you've already de-risked it to some extent, and that's not what we're looking for. Another unique feature about this, and one of the main reasons we have been able to do this via contracts, is that the review criteria has different weightage. So you can read the details in the solicitation, but what we've managed to do is 50% of the review criteria is for innovation. So other aspects like investigator history or pedigree, all of those kind of things are reviewed, are considered less critical in the review criteria than innovation. So we're trying to really evaluate the idea and not the people behind the idea. So that's a new aspect of this particular program. We're also trying to make the awards rapidly. You will know whether you're getting the award or not within maybe about 4 months from the proposal due date, and awards will be made within 6 months. So that's our goal. We hope to be successful in that. So we're working very hard, and we've put timelines in place internally as well to make these kind of turnaround. Just like in the transition grant, every company has to go through the NIH I-Corps program. And I'll talk a little bit about the I-Corps program in the upcoming slides to tell you a little bit about why we won the I-Corps program. And once you have de-risked this, you can go to the grant mechanism and then submit a direct to phase 2 or a fast track or maybe even another phase 1, depending on where you are after you have completed this particular phase 1 concept award. So the link to the award is here, solicitation is here. Please do take a look at it and read it carefully, and then feel free to contact Sherry with questions, and I'll respond to those via Sherry. So a question that's often asked is, what is innovative and what is not innovative? So this is a little bit difficult question to ask, basically because we're looking for technologies that we don't know about. We really want very innovative technology. So if we haven't heard about it or, we don't know, so those are the kind of technologies we're looking for. What is not innovative is a little bit more easier to answer. So if there are therapeutics targeting known pathways with known agents, then that's not what we're looking for. If you already have a funded SBIR project and you're looking to expand it either to multiple indications or some things or in that sort of vein, then that's not something that we want. Again, technologies that are in later stage of development are also some technologies that we don't really won't be responsive to this particular concept award. You're all welcome to submit those via our traditional SBIR, STTR omnibus, and we'll be happy to talk to you about that as well, but they won't be responsive for the concept award. This is just a brief description about the timeline. Like I said, from the proposal due date, which is July 28th, to the award, which is in Jan, we expect that to happen fairly quickly. In fact, within about 4 to 5 months, you should be notified whether you're getting the award or not. The white paper deadline is in March. It's a rolling deadline, so if you submit white papers early, we will get back the response to you as and when we get them. So that's the timeline for this particular concept award. Again, get in touch with us. For the concept award, of course, it has to go through the Office of Acquisition, but otherwise we are happy to talk to you about any other project that you have. So our website is there as well as our email addresses, to reach out to us at any time if you have any questions. At the SBIR Development Center, one of the things that we've been able to do is to provide a large amount of technical and other sort of commercialization resources because of the centralized nature of our SBIR Development Center. And so there are multiple funding opportunities beyond this particular 2 programs that we mentioned, and there's a link to a lot of these here. So take a look at those. But there are also a ton of non-funding resources, including the application assistance program for those who have never applied before, and a range of resources such as the I-Corps or investor initiatives. We do webinars and workshops all the time. We have mentoring programs in terms of CEO Roundtable and a few other programs that we're going to start soon. And we have a program called Connecting Awardees to Regulatory Experts, where we try to get FDA to answer some of your questions. So all of these resources are available to our awardees. I will not go through every single resource, but I will share these slide set with you. But I do want to talk about one of them actually, which is the I-Corps. Both the programs that we mentioned today, that is the SBIR Concept Award, as well as the SBIR Transition Grant, the people have to go through the I-Corps program. And essentially, this is for phase 1 awardees to define the value proposition early and to sort of flesh out their business model, as it were, for that particular product. So we are looking to, you have a team of 3 that usually goes through the I-Corps program, and the team consists of the PI of that particular project, usually the CEO or somebody at the senior leadership at the company who's able to make decisions that might change the project focus and so on. And then we usually have an industry mentor, and the industry mentor is usually who has somebody with a large network and can connect you with a lot of people for you to go and ask questions. The I-Corps program, this is not intended to teach you how to pitch, but it's intended for you to talk to different stakeholders, whether they are customers, whether they are other people who are going to be key players in getting your technology commercialized, maybe regulatory people or maybe vendors and so on, and understand how they interact with your particular technology. This is an 8-week program, and teams are required to conduct up to 100 interviews. Right now, the whole program is done virtually, and the last cohort, I think everybody managed about 100, 103, 110 also, I think, interviews. And it's very interesting to watch this process, because by the time you've sort of reached interview number 30, you've exhausted the people you know and the people who know the people you know. And then that's when I sort of see the magic happening, and then you sort of hear really fresh perspective from people who are strangers to your technology, and that helps refine your business model and people and then you can make these interesting pivots to your technology. The reason why we ask everybody to go through the I-Corps program is because these technologies are going to be very new. And at a very early stage. So as we are sort of de-risking the technical feasibility of the concept or of your technology, we also want to sort of de-risk the business feasibility, and that's the main reason that we are asking people to go through the I-Corps program. We do provide financial support for the I-Corps program which is around $55,000. A little bit of it goes towards the training and the contractor that manages the program and the instructors, but more than half of it can be used towards time for travel earlier. That was another thing that people used it for. Now I don't know. So that's essentially the role of the I-Corps program, and the reason why we're asking everybody go through the program. We found that people who put in effort to the I-Corps program get a lot out of it, but it is a time and resource intensive, sort of time intensive program. May not be resource intensive, but it's definitely time intensive program. So, but we want to make sure that everybody goes through it. There are several other slides here that have many of the other initiatives that Michael or I alluded to, but I'm not going to go through each of them in the interest of time, because I want to answer a lot of questions that are popping up in the Q&A box and in the chat box. So thank you for listening, and please send your questions to the Q&A box, and Corey and I will answer them.
Great. Thank you. And thanks, everyone, for all the interest. And we're going to try to just dive right in. Deepa, there's a number of questions in the chat box about I-Corps. And so these questions kind of take a couple different directions, but I think we can answer them all as one. So one is, does I-Corps give you an advantage in terms of reward, receiving an award? The second one is, if participants or awardees of the Small Business Transition Grant or the Concept Award have already completed I-Corps, either at NSF or at NIH, will they be required to do it again as part of their grant? The second one, I don't know about you, but I think I have to think about a little bit more for the Small Business Transition Grant.
For the Concept Award, they do, because again, we're looking for really innovative technologies. If you've de-risked it sufficiently to go through the I-Corps program, then the innovation may be a little bit of a challenge. So then maybe you're not as responsive for the innovation. So that's definitely, we will require you to go through the I-Corps program for that particular product. So that's going to be important. And would going through the I-Corps program previously give you an advantage? You know, it will give you an advantage in the sense that you are more savvy about your product and you can probably put together a better application. I don't think there's a review criteria specifically that says, oh, this person has gone through I-Corps program, so we should score them better. But in general, if you've gone through the I-Corps program, we expect that you will be able to incorporate the learnings of the program into the application.
Right. So for I-Corps, for the Small Business Transition Grant, I could envision a situation where maybe there was a waiver that was granted, but it would definitely be case by case, because I think it would, it's not something obviously that we've encountered yet. And it would depend on the product, the indication, it would depend on the specifics of the I-Corps learning related to the funded project. I'm going to ask you this next question, and then while you're answering it, look for some other ones. So someone is asking if their company can be virtual for a phase one, and then can they hire or contract with students during a phase one SBIR or STTR if they are faculty?
That's probably more for the Concept Award. So do you want to tackle that? My response essentially is that it can be virtual. It cannot be completely virtual. There has to be a space allocated for the company, and you need to sort of justify that you can do the work that you're proposing to do in that company-controlled space. And it can take different, I mean, we've seen people who allocate a portion of their lab this company-controlled space. So there are variations in what can be done. But completely virtual is always a challenge in peer review.
Completely virtual is actually not allowed in the legislation, but we have a very strict definition of completely virtual, I think. But you do need some company space, and as Deepa said, you can usually, sometimes you can rent space back from the university, sometimes you can get space from an incubator. But I think, yeah, if this question is related to the Small Business Transition Grant, there's also a couple questions about PI of the Small Business Transition Grant. So the PI of the Small Business Transition Grant really should be, it's intended for the postdoc or junior scientist that's moving out of the university and into the small business setting. And so it doesn't really work. I mean, the PI of the Small Business Transition Grant has to be no more than 8 years out from their terminal degree. It really is like a training grant, but it's not a training grant, right? It's still an STTR moving to an SBIR. So if in this scenario, it wouldn't really work to have a virtual company and then contract the students. The ideal candidate for this is someone who has worked on a project as either their postdoc work, or sometimes, when people have aged out of postdoc, they stay on as like a staff scientist or something, but they're still in a mentored role. So it's those candidates that have been working on a technology that is moving to a small business and they're moving with it. So that's our ideal candidate. Some of the specifics will probably get worked out a little bit more in peer review. So we'll learn more as the first set of applications come in and as they get reviewed. So that's why in the beginning, Deepa said, some of the specifics might start changing, and that's because we start to learn, what people are capable of doing out there. So I think this relates to the Small Business Transition Grant, but is there a fast track phase 1 SBIR and phase 2 SBIR that's combined? Not for the Small Business Transition Grant, but there is just a fast track. People can apply for a fast track under the SBIR program. So that would be an SBIR phase 1 with an SBIR phase 2. And if you're going to do that, I suggest you reach out to a program director in order to know if your technology is right for a fast track, because there's some specifics there. Deepa, there's questions about 1 year. So 1 year is a pretty long timeline for someone with a really hot and exciting brand new technology. So this is a concept award. So do people have to propose 1 year as their project timeline under the concept award?
So at the time of application, they do need to submit a 1 year proposal, because that's what everybody's going to be reviewed on. Once the project is awarded and we are in constant touch with the company and we can see the rate of progress, we can decide at that point of time on a case-by-case basis whether these people are accelerating fast enough for us to end the contract early. So for a contract, your payment is done on the submission of deliverables. So you submit your deliverables and you will get paid. So if you manage to submit all your deliverables fast enough, then we will, give you all of the money quick enough. So it will be on a case-by-case basis, but at the time of proposal, you do have to submit for a 1 year proposal.
Great. There are a couple questions about who owns the IP in a small business transition grant. And as I mentioned, we envision that this is a mechanism to help small businesses, or PIs and junior scientists come out of the university and into the small business setting. We assume a very common, so we don't get involved in saying who owns IP, but under the STTR program, there has to be an agreement between the university and the small business demonstrating that the small business has the rights to take the technology forward for commercialization. So whether that, I'm going to assume that most of the IP in these applications will be owned by the university, but we don't specifically state that it has to be owned by the university. We just state that it has to be a cooperative agreement between the university and the small business, and that and that the small business can take the technology forward. Oh, and that the university does, that there is work being done at the university and work being done at the small business. How is overlap with R21 handled for the concept award, Deepa, in cases where, those are sort of emerging ideas also, very early, smaller dollar awards. So if it's an academic that has a small business and then also has R21 funding, or even if a small business has some R21 funding, how's that overlap handled? Again,
you can't, of course, do the exact same work with the R21 and the SBIR. So if the technology is de-risked a little bit in terms of the basic mechanisms using R21, and then you have more of a product development de-risking, that should be allowed, and that's fine. But again, without knowing the specifics, it's a little difficult to say how we're going to manage it. All right, a couple other questions about PI for the Small Business Transition Grant, questions about whether the PI can be a PhD student who is about to graduate, or how underrepresented status is if there's like an early stage investigator type program. So right now, we are encouraging women and underrepresented scientists to apply to the Small Business Transition Grant.
there's not a special review or a bump in review, but we are encouraging individuals who are underrepresented to apply to this program. And then a graduate student graduating, I shouldn't have picked this question. I think we handled this in RFA. We talked about this a little bit. Our main concern there is that we don't want, it can be really difficult if you're, because of the technology mentor, if the lab head of the academic lab is involved in the small business, we are concerned about getting into small business and equity, discussions with someone who then is going to sign off on a dissertation. So I don't think we limit it, but I definitely encourage people who are going to be graduating to reach out to me and let's talk about your scenario before you apply to the Small Business Transition Grant. Deepa, for the concept award, if there's a previously approved molecule, but it looks like it's being repurposed, maybe with a different route of delivery or a new indication, would that work for the concept award?
Generally, no. Again, if you want to send us a couple of pages on that, then we can take a look at it and respond. But generally, we are looking for something that is not already approved.
Great. And then how about university faculty as PI or co-PI on a concept award? Because that has to, it's a contract, so it's SBIR, right? It's not STTR?
It is SBIR. We can't really do contracts as STTR, so it is an SBIR. But a university employee can be a co-PI. Yep.
So there was, I've missed it. There was a question about applicant assistance program, and can someone apply for a small business transition grant and then also apply for the applicant assistance program? And you would have to apply for the applicant assistance program first, I believe. I don't remember when the next deadline is. You technically could. I think the tricky thing is that if you have a small business transition grant that's under review and then you apply for the applicant assistance program, we don't know if that'll be funded because we don't know the outcome of review, so it's highly unlikely that you'd be selected for the AAP. Furthermore, if you apply to AAP and then you end up submitting an SBIR or STTR application and it's under review, you cannot then have a small business transition grant under review at the same time covering the same activities. So again, I mean, that might be a really good situation to reach out to us ahead of time and talk through the specifics. We have a few more minutes here. Let's see how we can, how much we can get done. Oh, this is a good one. So Deepa, how do they submit the white paper? How do you submit the white paper? You send an email to the to NCI SBIR, the email address to Sherry Wells. And then will having preliminary data in the concept award application put them at a disadvantage? Well, if you have tons of preliminary data, then probably we would say, yeah, it's de-risked enough. So again, the idea is that we're looking for technologies that are not that de-risked. So having preliminary data doesn't put you at a disadvantage, but again, it's the stage that is very important, which stage you are. You can't have something with absolutely no data in the sense that you have to have some sort of scientific rationale why your concept is even worth considering. So there has to be some sort of a scientific rationale. That sounds great. There are a few questions about the Small Business Transition Grant and the funding cycle and the maturity of the company. So relationship to the university. So the whole intent here is really a training grant to help people move out of the university and into the small business. If there is a small business that is already established and has an accomplished PI that would be competitive for a either an STTR fast track or an SBIR fast track grant under the normal mechanism, we encourage you to go that direction. This is to really help provide technology development support and do it in a thoughtful, mentored way at the same time. So if you have questions, you know, feel free to reach out to me. And then let's see. If they submit a white paper, will they be told that the proposal is responsive or non-responsive to the concept award? Is that the purpose of the white paper?
Generally, yes. We would tell you whether to go ahead or not.
Okay. And is there any specific format for that white paper?
No, I think what the white paper should have, the components are listed in the solicitation. The exact formatting is left up to you.
Okay. So there are a couple more questions about small business transition grant and PI. Can the PI be the CEO of a company? Yes. I mean, if it's a junior scientist that they themselves are moving to become the CEO of a company, they're moving to become an entrepreneur, they could certainly apply for the small business transition grant. Additionally, if it is a postdoc or junior scientist that's moving with a technology into a small business, they could apply, but they need to be 8 or fewer years out from their terminal degree. If it's an established or experienced scientist that is either has experience in industry or in the academic setting and is applying for the small business transition grant but using PIs, that's probably not the appropriate mechanism. Then the standard SBIR or STTR, not the transition grant, is a better way to go there. Again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. There is another question: is NCI interested in receiving applications from entrepreneurs that do not have a history of research in cancer? And is innovation the focus, or is it the prior history of the PI? I assume this is for the concept award.
For the concept award, innovation is the focus. We are really looking for people who, who are new to the program. So those kind of individuals are highly encouraged.
Yeah, oftentimes when I've seen that in peer review, peer reviewers like to see maybe someone affiliated with a company that has some knowledge of cancer, right? Either as a consultant or a collaborator or something. What's been your experience, Deepa?
So yeah, you have to have some sort of provide some degree of confidence to peer review and the program that somebody will be able to do the work and that that they have the advisors around to help them. But in the concept award, essentially the idea is to not pay as much attention to the previous funding history of the applicant, but to focus more on the idea. So for those who have not received SBIR, STTR awards, or from those from universities that do not traditionally apply to SBIR, STTR awards, so those kind of individuals are highly encouraged to apply.
There's one, in just the last 1 minute here, there's one clarification, and the person said rather than 1 year as a timeline for the project, they meant 1 year from application to receipt of funding is a really long time if they have a brand new innovative idea. What do you say about that?
From application to receipt of funding is 6 months, not 1 year.
For the concept award, yeah.
For the concept award, you'll be notified in 4 months, or maybe a max 5, whether you're getting the award, and you would get the award within 6 months. Typically, for SBIR, it's usually 9 to 12 months. So the fact that we can shorten it to 6 months is actually a big deal for us. It may not seem that way, but within the constraints of the federal government and its process, this is a pretty innovative idea to give these quick funding for at least the NIH. So we are trying as much as possible to shorten it even more, but this is where we are right now.
Yeah, similarly with the small business transition grant, it's an innovative idea to match mentoring and small business awards. So we're working through the specifics on that. It is 3 o'clock Eastern time now, so we are just ending there. Oh, a quick answer to a question: what's the deadline for the Small Business Transition Grant? It is March 10th.